Well, hello, and welcome to 17 Minutes of Science. My name is Sean Lockery, and I am co-founder and chief technology officer here at Vivo Biosystems. And it's my great pleasure to introduce today's guest, Mr. John Donoghue, president of the Northwest Mycological Consultants. John's been a mushroom grower, researcher, and a consultant for more than 30 years. He's worked on numerous projects, not only here in the US Northwest, but also in places far afield, including Vietnam, Laos, Bhutan, Colombia, Japan, Taiwan, Mexico, Argentina, Iceland, and Australia. and among his many publications is the book, The Shiitake Growers Handbook, The Art and Science of Mushroom Cultivation, a definitive resource for shiitake growers worldwide. And there you see it exists. John, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Sean. Sorry I'm late.
That's all right. It's better late than never.
That's
so John, you know, most of us think of mushrooms as those little toadstool shaped things that poke up from the soil in our gardens and meadows, but I understand there's much more to the organism than that. How do toadstools relate to the greater fungus?
Yeah, so they're one little chunk of the fungi. You know, yeasts are another that make beer and stuff, and they're just usually single-celled things. But a lot of the mushrooms that we think about are the mushroom itself is just the fruiting body of the fungus. So it would be in some vague way similar to an apple on an apple tree. But this network of hyphae, the thin stranded things that can go all through the soil or wood or whatever, they excrete enzymes and break down different things for different fungi and get their nutrients that way. They breathe much like we do, where most of them use, there's many kinds, but all the mushrooms I think that you're thinking about would use oxygen and give off carbon dioxide. And here's, like, I can show you maybe. This would be, if you can see it. So this would be grain, that's rye grain in this case. And it's been put in this bag and sterilized, and then inoculated with some other rye grain that had already been colonized with a pure culture of, in this case, shiitake. And you can see the white there, white patches growing out from the grains, and so they radiate out from the grains, and ultimately will completely colonize the stuff. And during this, what they're doing is they're breaking down initially the easy sugars and whatnot, but breaking down the grain in order to get nutrients to grow. And then ultimately, primordia will form, which are the start of mushrooms, and then those will develop into what are called pins, and then into mushrooms that we know and love.
Okay. Does it damage the overall organism when we pick mushrooms, when we go mushroom hunting?
Yeah. So when you pick a mushroom out from somewhere, you're just picking the fruiting body. So you're not picking all of that stuff, which is its main body. I think the biggest organism in the world is a fungus, and it's I don't know if it's in Washington State or Michigan. It used to be in Michigan. And it's this honey mushroom, Armillaria mellia, and it's acres and acres of miles, I think, of ground that's covered with all one individual, which they can tell through genetic means, all one individual of this hyphae. And it will, it's a wood rotting thing, so it will grow up on trees and, in that case, kill them.
Well, I was actually, I was just reading about that in anticipation of our conversations. And it, according to my sources, it's actually in Oregon. And it's sort of near the Malheur Reservation. And it is damaging trees, apparently. And that's kind of how they discovered it.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you'd ever gone out there to have a look at it, but apparently not yet.
Not yet. I haven't to that. You know, there's, when they first started doing that work, it was in Michigan, and then Washington said, "Oh, we have one." And actually, a friend of mine, Mike McWilliams, I don't know if you know him. He's a dancer and whatnot, you know, but he does flyovers for looking for diseased trees. He's a forest pathologist, and he actually found that place.
Okay, I see. Okay. Are the honey mushrooms edible and do they taste good?
Yeah, the honey mushrooms are good, and you know, they're sold commercially in Japan and stuff. You know, typically harvested from the wild. They're good. They are they're tough to identify because they look really different one from the other. So you know, it's not for the novice, I don't think.
I see.
Yeah.
And I imagine they might look similar to something that you wouldn't want to eat.
Right. Well, and the Armillaria mellia is the one that people eat. You know, the Armillaria that's out there is a different species, and I think it's edible too. But
I see.
I wouldn't mess with it.
Okay, fair enough. I'll take your advice. So, you know, going forward here, what first drew you to mycology and in general and cultivating mushrooms in particular, if you're at liberty to disclose?
Oh yeah. So, well, I grew up a bit in Japan, and of course, in Japan, they, you know, mushrooms are part of their thing, and then ultimately, I was after I, you know, in my dissident days as a high schooler, um, then went to Michigan State University and was kind of drawn into the mycological thing. Although there's some great people there for mushrooms and stuff. But anyway, at that point, I ran into this book by a guy named Rolf Singer, and it's what's it called, Mushrooms and Man or something. I can't remember the name of it even now. But they had a section in there about shiitake growing in Japan, and I thought, oh well, that's it. I got to do that. And what's interesting is and so I started pursuing that. But what's interesting is the ultimately many years later I got to go with Rolf Singer to Japan, and we went to a bunch of various different mushroom farms and whatnot. So it was a neat little circle thing, one of life's fun circles.
Putting the fun back into fungus, they say.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, but really, what it is, though, I mean, when I usually tell people is my brother's named Mike, you see, and so I'm studying people named Mike, so I'm a mycologist.
I bet your brother was thrilled by that connection. So my understanding is that you were one of the first employees, if employee is quite the right word, at Northwest Mycological Consultants, which for the audience is an Oregon-based company serving the specialty mushroom growing industry, which has been active since about 1985. How did you get started with NMC, and what is your role there today?
Well, by that time I was growing shiitake, which in the you know, I started growing shiitake in the late 70s, and at that time the having that organism in the States was illegal because they thought it would become the next Dutch elm disease, and it's not a pathogen of trees at all. So they were just kind of scared. But so I had a number of years of growing and selling mushrooms, you know, shiitake mushrooms. And Bill Dennison, who was now passed, but was the mycologist at OSU, Oregon State. He kept getting queries from people, you know, what about growing mushrooms? What about, you know, how do I deal with mold in my, you know, walls and stuff like that? And thought, well, what there needs to be is a company that is that's a consulting company, basically, that is made up of people who know something about all those things, and they can sort, you know, parse out who's the best person for whatever. And so that's when I got involved with them, because I knew about mushroom growing. And that actually became the main sort of bread and butter of NMC, and led to, you know, like I say, there wasn't really anybody growing shiitake. And then, you know, with NMC, with reliable spawn, you know, the seed for growing mushrooms, what I was just showing you in those bags, and, you know, technology transfer and you know, that sort of thing, Oregon became the second most highest producer of shiitake in the States, you know, Pennsylvania being the first. And that, you know, so that's, NMC has been real vital to helping that happen.
Hmm. And so what is your role there now?
Well, I'm the president now, you know.
Okay, well, that could mean a lot
And
of
I didn't get outvoted.
okay. But I mean, I sort of imagine you out on the floor checking the machines and keeping everything.
Oh, yeah.
You're probably also heavily into operations.
Yeah, operations and whatnot. And so it's, you know, these bags that I was showing you. So these are these bags. What happens is that whatever the substrate is, the stuff that the mushroom's growing on, typically, although, you know, these things are mostly wood rotting organisms, so they're you know, evolved to be in wood and grow and break down wood. Well, and that's what I started doing, you know, growing shiitake in natural logs. You drill holes and stick little dowels or sawdust that's colonized with the stuff in there, and voila, it ultimately grows mushrooms. But most of it now, worldwide even, is of those mushrooms and are grown on sterilized or heat-treated sawdust, where the sawdust is ultimately put into one of these bags. And there's many different ways, but the typical way is the sawdust with some grain, some nutrients added to it, and hydrated water, are put into bags and then sterilized or heat treated, either for, if it's sterilized for like 3.5 hours, and if it's heat, you know, just steam room, then it might be more like 12 hours. Those are cooled, and then some of the spawn, the grains from that, what I showed earlier, are put into the bag, usually in front of a filter hood that keeps out all other organisms. And then the bag is sealed up. But the thing with these bags, though, is this thing right here is a filter patch that behind it in the bag, but behind it in the bag is, there's a hole in the cut in the bag, and this filter allows gases, oxygen to go, and CO2 to pass between the filter, but keeps out other organisms. So you get to grow your fungus in just by itself in this bag until it's fully colonized, and then part or all of that bag is removed in the mushrooms. So what we do is work. You know, I made machines to make these bags, and we sell them all over the world, and then we produce spawn, grain spawn for that, and that's mostly, although we ship as far as, I don't know, the other side of Canada and Texas, but most of it's more local, and you know, so bags and spawn and whatnot, and then work with farms to keep them going if they're having trouble, figure out what the troubles are, help farms start up, that sort of thing. So and then we've done a bunch of sort of basic research. Like, one of the things I spend a lot of time on is what's the influence of the gas levels in the bag that's determined by, among other things, the filter patch. What's that? How does that influence the crop? And it turns out, just as you expect, if you were to stick a bag with a little hole over your head, you wouldn't be as productive if you stuck a bag with a big hole over your head. You know.
Okay.
It's you know, it's not rocket science, but in the mushroom growing industry, it really hadn't been thought about much.
Uh-huh.
And then there, you know, we've done a bunch with doing sort of coax postulate on, well, what is this disease these people are having, you know?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the name. What's the disease?
Well, a bunch of different. Well, in that case, bacterial diseases. There was a bacterial, we called it brown center rot, that was never seen in shiitake before, but had been seen a bit in button mushrooms in Australia, and it became a thing that really knocked back the growers around here. And so the question was, well, first of all, what's the organism? And then secondly is, you know, how do you manage the crop to not have the problem? And, you know, figuring out how did that organism cause disease, you know, and how did it, you know, trying to figure out how it got there. It turns out it came from East Coast production.
Hmm. Well, you know, many of the audience here, I'm sure, will agree that mushrooms are all over the media these days. And we hear about them, of course, as centuries-old medicines and nutraceuticals. But new applications seem to appear all the time, where I've now been reading about mushroom meat, and mushroom leather, and mushroom biofuel, and something that you told me about earlier called mycoremediation. And there's even, as you know, a resurgence of psychedelic mushrooms in the treatment of various psychological disorders. Where is your industry going?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, it's certainly diversifying from just, growing mushrooms, that people eat, culinary things. So, a lot of the specialty mushroom growers, which, non-button mushroom growers, those are sort of very different farm situation. Most of those are wood rotting things that are good edible, but a lot of them are also not only are they good edibles, but they also have properties that people can isolate that help with things like cancer and what have you, a bunch of disease things, high blood pressure and that kind of thing. And so now what you find is people are growing those and turning them into powders and putting in pills, and people take pills, because I think most people, it's changing in the States, but the demographics used to be people would think mushrooms would kill you, if you ate them, or the only mushroom they knew was the button mushroom canned on something that they didn't like. So that's really changed, starting in the mid 80s, really, but now what you have is a lot of there's farms that just grow things that really are, you wouldn't consider an edible mushroom here in the States, but they grow those for nutraceutical ingredients.
I see. Well, we've got just about a little less than a minute left.
Oh,
this has been wonderful chatting with you. Did you have something you wanted to take us out with?
Oh, I did. I don't know if you can. Let me move this.
Yeah, I can. I see a creation in the background there.
Oh, you can't see this much. Wait a minute. Let me tilt that down a little. Yeah, that's better. There's the mushroom right there.
Okay, so it's dancing. So that's a pig dancing on a mushroom to a guy playing fiddle while he taps his feet. And so I thank you very much, John. I look forward to further communication with you in the future. And I want to thank everyone who's joined us for this session on the coming shroom boom ? Thank you.
That's great, Sean. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on here. Thanks everybody for being there.
Over and out.
All right.